Hi everyone, we are going to use radial symmetry to make a design of a decorative tree-like structure that we can use as like a jewelry organizer to hang keys from or just to be a decoration in itself. I'm going to use symmetry function in my drawing program here to make it easier. But in Tinkercad, we're going to be using the duplicate and repeat tool to create the branches. So seen from the top, we will end up with a shape that is the trunk of our tree, as well as individual branches and some extra shapes on those branches. And we'll be able to make duplicates and copy them all the way around in a circle and use some more shapes to create a base underneath that. So we'll see that from the side here, we're going to end up creating the trunk of our structure with the roots coming out at the base as a shape to hold it up, and the individual branches coming out at an angle so that we can print them without supports. Our smaller branches will be here so that when we put something like a ring or a keychain onto our tree, it's not going to slide all the way down. And then we'll have an array of branches that we can add things to all the way up. And we'll be able to make this by just creating one branch and duplicating and rotating it around into all the positions we need. All right, we'll start building that, and we are going to build our tree design by making one branch and copying it around so we can get a very complex looking shape, but not have to build all of that complexity one piece at a time. Let's move our example out of the way here. We're going to create the trunk of our tree jewelry stand by using a cone. And with our cone, we're going to use our settings in the shape box here to give it the size that we want. I'm going to make the top radius a little bit larger so that it doesn't come to a sharp point. And we'll increase the base radius a bit. Crank the height all the way up. And turn the sides all the way up. So now we have a shape that tapers towards the top, so it's still a nice cone. We're going to use this same cone shape to create all of our branches. Let's go ahead and duplicate this our first time. Now we're going to rotate it into position and shrink it down so that it creates a single branch. So I'm going to rotate my view so I can see the two rotate handles that pop up here. Remember that all you have to do is right-click somewhere to change the direction of your view. You can also use the view cube up here and look at it from one of these corners, and that makes it easy to see our rotate handles. So I'm going to tilt my first branch out 45 degrees. The length of our cone is at 45 degrees, and the side is a little bit steeper since it tapers in. And that means that we should be able to print it without supports because the angle goes up so steeply, it'll be each layer overlapping. We'll take a look closer at that in our slicing video. So now I need my branch to be thin enough that I can do something like put a ring on it and that it doesn't stick out the side there. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click on one of the handles and just drag it down. So now we have a smaller version of our branch. Let's move it into position. I'm going to use the arrow keys so that it stays centered on my tree trunk shape here. And just move it so it's sticking out. And I think I want to raise it up a little bit so that in case we hang a large bracelet or something longer from it, it's not just going to be hitting the table. Now that I have moved my first version of this, if I hit duplicate again, it's going to repeat this move. Remember that what I did was rotate, scale down, and raise it up. So if I click on this, we're going to have a new version here that has been rotated down 45 degrees and moved up into position. You can see this is the same in relationship to our first cone as our first branch here, as our first branch is in relationship to this one. You can use this trick to make interesting patterns. If we keep on duplicating, we're going to end up making smaller and smaller and further rotating cones. But as they all go downwards, they're going to be in a position where we need to support the overhanging tips of them. I definitely don't want all of my cones here, and I don't need this much detail, although you can add interesting details to yours. I'm going to delete these extra examples that I just made. We'll take our second one here and change its position so it's sticking up out of the top. Let's go ahead and just use our rotate handle here and keep our mouse inside so we can stand it straight up. And then we can raise it so that it pokes out the top of our branch here. It's probably a little bit longer than we really need, so I'll just shorten it a little. And just to make this look a little more interesting, we'll tilt this so that it's not just 90 degrees and straight up. So let's select our branch, both of the pieces of our branch here, and we're going to look at it from the side so we can see our rotate handle, and I'll tilt it to the first notch there. So now the branch, the whole thing is tilting over. We can see that the base is sticking out from the side here, which isn't what I want. So we're just going to nudge it over so it looks like it's part of the trunk. And now we have everything at a slight angle so it looks a little more organic. Now we're going to make some duplicates of this. And since I want them to go around in a perfect circle around my trunk, I'm going to need to create a reversed branch that is on the opposite side. Right now, when I rotate things, it's going from the center of the entire object. So as you can see, if I rotate this, it's going around in this direction. Now if I make duplicates and rotate them, they're all going to be right here. And since I want them to go around the trunk, I need the trunk to be the center of my object. So let's make a duplicate and then go over to our mirror tool. And we're going to flip this one in the opposite direction. And then we'll also flip it in the opposite direction this way. So now I have a complete mirror image of my first branch. I'm going to use the arrow keys to just move it over to the other side. Then let's make sure that we have our branch positioned so that it's inside of the tree. All right. So now we have a second branch on the opposite side. I'm going to hold down Shift and select the first branch, and we're going to group all of these guys together. Make sure that we don't group the trunk together, or we're going to be making a lot of duplicates of the trunk right on top of each other, which we don't want. So we're going to make this group. Now we have both of the branches as one object, and it doesn't really matter where I move them to because I want the center of these mirrored branches to be in the center of this. So let's select our two objects, click on the Align tool, and we'll hit the Center button on our little alignment handles here. So now we have our branch object centered in the middle of our trunk. Now when I rotate, it's going to spin around the center. This means that I can duplicate it and then rotate it, and we'll go a number of steps so that they are far enough apart that I think I can use them to hang different things from. And in my example, I made two different rings of the same, but I think I want these to go up a little bit. So now because I've moved them up as well as rotating, each time I hit duplicate and repeat, it's going to duplicate it and move it up. So now you can see that we have a spiral of branches going upwards. And if I've moved them up high enough, I can possibly hit duplicate and repeat to have them one over the other. These branches aren't getting any smaller as they go up because I didn't shrink them down during my repeat. I can make a top set of branches on here by creating a new copy and moving them up. So I'm going to click on an empty space here, click on one of my duplicates. Now when I duplicate it, it will not remember the moves to repeat since I selected something else. So we'll move this up to the top, and then we'll hold down Shift to shrink this down. We're using the top handle so it shrinks down from the center. Now we've shrunk them down enough that they are attached. They're all part of the trunk and they don't have any sides sticking out there. If I duplicate again, I'm going to go up and shrink again, which is not what I want. So let's delete that one and click on this again since it's forgotten the repeat. We'll duplicate and we'll do our rotate. And then duplicate it again until we have our entire top done. Now I can make it so that the top branches don't line up perfectly with the lower branches by looking at it from the side here. I'll select just my top branches all together, and then we'll use the rotate to go one step to the side there. And because we are rotating everything around in a circle, you could use any measurement you want. You can rotate this a few degrees just to get it to look the way you want it. I'm just using the snaps because it's a handy way to make sure that I'm rotating the same amount each time. And if I want them to line up again, I can always snap them back one. So now I have some spiraling and some circling branches. We have a very narrow bottom here. And that means if we put anything heavy on these guys, he could easily tip over. So let's make a base. I'm going to go down and grab a shape that's already flat on the bottom. So we'll take our half sphere here and stretch it out to the width I want. So we'll make this 110 millimeters across. And then we'll go ahead and select it and the trunk. So I have these two shapes selected, and we'll make sure that it's aligned in the center. I don't want the tree trunk to move, so I'm going to click on the trunk again so that the alignment tools line up with the trunk. Then I can center in both directions. And now, because this is centered and it extends the same amount on each side, when I do my duplicate and rotate trick, these are going to stick out that exact amount. So I can go ahead and move it 2 steps this way, and we'll duplicate it a couple of times. So now I have a very stable base here. It looks a little bit like the tree roots, although a little bit like a flower with these colors. And now I can finally group the entire set of shapes. Go ahead and group everything. Because we have a lot of surfaces here that are slightly complex, Tinkercad could take a long time thinking about it. Well, it's grouping that, unhide everything. You can use other shapes to create your own spiraling or rotating design. This is actually still made of cones with the sides set down instead of smoothing them out to make them look a bit like crystals with a star at the bottom instead of some other shapes. Let's try out duplicate and repeat with rotations, see what kind of crazy designs you can make. We'll double check that our method will work for printing without supports and set this thing up for a long print. We are going to set up this crazy tree for printing. So let's select the object that we want in Tinkercad and hit export. I'm going to make sure that we're using only the selected shape so I don't get my other examples back there, and we'll create an STL file. Then we are going to head over to Cura for slicing. In here, we're going to open up the jewelry tree here and double check that we have a flat surface on the bottom that's going to be stuck to the floor of our printer. We can see that right here we have red markings on all of the downward facing parts of our tree branches. Even though we designed this to be pointed at a 45-degree angle, the slicer, if we look down here at our support settings, has an overhang angle of 35. So anything that is 35 or more is going to get support underneath it. This is not actually necessary. It's a somewhat overly safe estimate of what our printer can do. We'll take a look by turning off our supports and slicing it. And hitting preview. So we can see that we have a 6-hour print here. And if we scroll down the slices here to where we have some of our branches sticking out, we can zoom in and take a look at what it's actually going to be like as it goes out over the edge. So you can see that even though we are going out a little bit on each layer, most of our branch is directly on top of the layer below. I can actually use this to show how our printer is going to draw the layers. It's going to do the inner wall first, and then you can see that as it's putting the outer wall out there, if we zoom in really close, the line that our printer is making, which is the size of the nozzle, a little less than 0.5 millimeter, is halfway over the line below it, which means it should stick well enough to this and not have the ability to really droop over the side. There may be some points where we have a fairly sharp angle at the end here that might not come out as clean as we would like. But we'll have to print it and see how it turns out. So we can safely say that we won't need to build supports, which is good because supports are going to be really difficult with all of these branches on top of each other. So now that we have our slices the way we want them, we'll just save this G-code to file and we'll be ready to try out this very large print.